Yeah, so today I was thinking of doing something that I usually do, and I think it's something that's unique to me as a Magic the Gathering fan. I like to read the Magic the Gathering articles, specifically the ones that talk about the mechanics and the development side, the making magic article uh, features, I guess is what you call it. Yeah, so this one by Mark Rosewater, head designer, right? Returning to Middle Earth with Universes Beyond. Yeah, so this is actually a small set, if I remember reading right. Because usually a set has 270x cards, while this one has about 200. And I think it only has 5 draft archetypes compared to the usual 10. Not that a small set Not that a large set can't have just 5 draft archetypes, but usually small sets only have 5 draft archetypes. But that doesn't take away from the draft experience or the game experience, I think. Anyway, so an interesting thing about this is that The Hobbit is a prequel, technically the first book by J.R.R. Tolkien, right? But they already made a Magic the Gathering set for Lord of the Rings. So technically, it is kind of a return set. Would I say it's a return set, like the first Universes Beyond return set? I guess arguably, because technically, I think they did, because the other property, Universes Beyond property that you could argue as a return set is Marvel, because they went to Spider-Man first, and then they added Spider-Man characters in the Marvel superhero set. But I don't think there's like a narrative thread that connects the two, or even like a mechanic or a world building. Well, I guess in some sense world building, but not too much. Anyway, so yeah, that's why Mark Rosewater talks about coming back. There's a lot of universes within sets that came back, and they usually have a methodology as to how to do it. You have to revisit the things that worked well last time because there will be fans, and you have to keep what's iconic, what was well like, so that the people who expect them, uh, their expectations will be met. So, what were the two things mechanically? Sagas and the mass. So, sagas, yeah, they're an enchantment type that have steps basically, and then at the end of the step, you sacrifice them. They usually represent stories, legends, and etc. So, since there's a lot of world building in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I guess this would be a really good mechanic to have to repeat. Meanwhile, a mass was originally in War of the Spark to show off basically amassing a giant zombie army, and then used in Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings set, for goblins and orcs. But I think it was only an orc army. And now they change it to being a goblin army because there were more goblins in the story of The Hobbit. Mhm. So in the maybe, the might reuse connected to the saga um, mechanic theme, they use they could use historic. So historic is a batching mechanic that counts artifacts, legendary cards, and sagas specifically to and they name those three types of cards as historic. And then whenever a card or a mechanic, sorry, whenever a mechanic would refer to a historic card, it could be one of the three. So it's interesting because Saga is an enchantment subtype, an artifact is a card type, and the legend is a super type. So you could have a legendary artifact and a legendary Saga. Could you have a legendary artifact Saga? I guess a legendary artifact enchantment Saga. Anyway, so they came up with a new mechanic actually that I think they'll discuss later, called Storied, which is kind of related to Historic, but it's used in a different way. And then, oh, this is interesting. What are the don't reuse buckets? What are the things that failed in Lord of the Rings? Oh, yeah, this one. I think I agree with this. The ring tempts you. Um, I didn't play with Lord of the Rings cards either in draft, standard, or commander, but I remember when I saw this mechanic, it seemed too complicated. Yeah, complex, because there's a card sheet, or as it grants you four abilities whenever it grants you an ability when the ring tempts you or the creature that you're designating as the ring bearer, and it's kind of like it ramps up every time. So you'd want it to tempt you four times to gain the maximum amount of value. But for the life of me, I think I cannot remember. I think if the ring tempts you once, you're legendary. The creature you choose a ring bearer, the ring bearer is legendary. Um, if it tempts you twice, I think no, I can't even remember. Legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Okay, so an evasive mechanic. Then, when it attacks, draw a card and discard a card. So a loot. Then, whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifice it at the end of combat. Okay, so it has to be blocked by a creature with less power. Oh, I see. So if there's a creature with lesser power and it's somehow indestructible or something, it gets sacrificed anyway. And then whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. So that's in addition to the combat damage, I'm guessing. I mean, yeah. So find the new thing. What's the new thing? Explore themes, mechanics from other sets. Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, here. I guess it's more of this article is more about how you world build and design for universes beyond sets. So they don't control the flavor. You don't have control of the lore, the world building, so you need to adapt to it, especially for what the fans expect. Yeah. Different stories, correct. I see, I see. Oh yeah, here we go. The Hobbit is a smaller set. Hmm. And here is where he discusses it. The Hobbit's core structure was built around the concept of the five armies. Though, if I remember correctly, because I did read the Hobbit book a while back. And actually, I didn't read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I read the Hobbit. And I think, from what I remember, the five armies aren't the species. Because there were five species: humans, goblins, wolves, dwarves, and elves were there. And I think some eagles and orcs were there technically. But the five armies are actually like two armies of orcs and goblins and wolves, one army of elves and humans, like the quote unquote good guys, the dwarves, because they had their own agenda or their own stakes because they wanted Moria. I mean, Yeah. And then what's that one? Two, and the Eagles. The Eagles were there. So yeah, I think it's not a direct count of that. Anyway, yeah. So five draft archetypes, five armies, five draft archetypes. Sure. And I think they did an interesting color matching, color designation. Five two-color archetypes. Not five ally, not enemy, but a mix of the two. So they got white blue humans with recruit, a new mechanic, black red goblins with a mass, black green wolves with ferocious, red white dwarves with storied, and green blue elves with landfall. It's interesting to me whenever they do this mix of neither allied, this five two color archetypes with neither all ally or all enemy, because they did this with, there's a limited number of ways you can do this, and I think they've done this with the guilds of Ravnica, with the Ravnica sets, and also they did it with the Ravnica sets, and they did it with Lorwyn. And I think Lorwyn copied one of the previous sets in terms of color matching. This one is Azorius, Rakdos, Golgari, Boros, and Simic. Hmm. Simic. I think this is a new one. It's neither Return to Ravnica nor Gatecrash, and it's neither Ravnica Allegiance or Guilds of Ravnica. What did the Lorwyn Eclipse copy? They had Azorius, white blue, blue red. Is it red black Rakdos, black green Golgari, and green black green and green white Selesnya? But yeah, it copied Return to Ravnica. Okay, so anyway, another useful tool focusing on a different subset of the world. Yep. Oh, okay, that was it. So I guess he didn't really talk about the mechanics. Um, that's what I wanted to talk about. Here we go, I guess. Just the feature article from Matt Tabak. So yeah, story is if you control three or more artifacts, legendaries, and or sagas, you have an enduring story for the rest of the game. If you could use the term historic, if you control three or more historic permanents. So that's interesting. The interesting thing about Storied is that it's a threshold mechanic that makes a permanent designation on the player. So it reminds me of Ascend and what is the Aether Drift mechanic? Start your engines to some extent, I guess, but start your engines had levels to it. This is more like Ascend, I'd say. That's interesting because I think historic in Dominaria as well, because legendaries and sagas are a difficult thing to build around. Historic was like you won't get a lot of legendaries or not enough to make a draft archetype, and not enough sagas because those are very specific, right? I mean, in commander deck or when you're deck building, sure, but I think historic draft archetypes and storied in relation are going to focus more on artifacts, which I assume because dwarves are blacksmiths in the lore, and I think I've seen a lot of equipment and artifact based what do you call those leaks? No, not leaks. Spoilers. Yeah. So it seems like more of an artifact focused archetype that wants you to. I guess the white part of it is to have those permanents, and the red part of it is you want to reach it really fast. I guess. Recruit. So whenever this Queen of Dale legendary creature casts their first non-creature spell each turn, you recruit. What's recruit? Draw a card and discard a card. If you discard a non-land card, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. This reminds me of Connive. Right, and that was a white, blue, black mechanic. So you're looting, and if you discard a non-land card, so here you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. For Connive, it was you put a +1/+1 token, sorry, counter on the creature that connived. So it's you have to target it. This one doesn't target, or there's no creature that does the action. It doesn't target. Sorry, there's no creature that connives. Um, you recruit. The player recruits, and you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Interesting. It's interesting because the reason why it was in black for connive was, I think, because you could choose which card to discard. I mean, of course you can choose, but there's a strategic advantage to putting cards in the graveyard. Here, given that it's specifically white-blue, I think it's interesting because I think it'll open up graveyard synergies, even though it's not in black. That's interesting. Hone counters. Uh, a, sp- a specific type of counter, interesting. So this seems to be Sting, Bilbo Sword, Legendary Artifact, Equipment, Flash. When Sting enters, put a home counter on Sting for each creature target opponent controls. Attach Sting up to one target creature you control. A hone counter. Each hone counter on an equipment grants +1/+0 to a equipped creature. So that's interesting. You hone an equipment. The more you hone it, the better it'll get. It's interesting because you only get +1/+0. So I guess they didn't want hone counters to really like you attack better, but you don't defend better. And I think that's good because if you spam hone counters, you're basically creating a really like you're opening the game up to a stalemate because you can just keep it for you can force a creature to attack, and you can use it for defending indefinitely. So it's interesting that it's not an effect. It's not an ability that gives uh, it 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 doesn't give the ability to the equipment. The equipment doesn't gain an ability. It's just an inherent ability of the counter. That's what it says here. Notably, this isn't an ability given to the equipment, it's just true because of rules association. So sometimes that happens. I don't know yet why this matters, but I guess I think it matters if you make an equipment lose all its abilities and it will still give the creature +1/+0 because of rules association. But I'm not sure. I guess that's when it will matter. Anyway, and in adventures, because of course, kind of the narrative theme of the Hobbit is that you're going off on an adventure. You're gonna tell a story afterwards, right? But I think it is good because, like, adventure is a good mechanic. It is the embedding of an instant or a sorcery onto a permanent, such that you can cast the instant or sorcery and then cast the permanent. So it gives more choices to the player. Um, and I think it makes sense because I mean it helps out the set because this is not a good example of what I'm trying to say, but usually there will be creatures or permanents that will have a large mana cost. Um, when a set like this has legendary creatures and big, huge characters like the Smog, probably if Smog was an adventure card, I don't know if he is or not. Anyway, if Smog was an adventure card, you could make him be like an 8 to cast, which makes sense because he's like the big bad. But when you draw him, he'll be useless if you're not at 8 mana, or even then, like you'll tap out just to cast him. at least he'll have some use with an adventure, and then you can still cast him afterwards. So it's kind of like, for I think it's kind of spoiling your players for choice, but that's still good to have because you can do both. I don't know. Yep, explanation. And lastly, is this last? I guess last of the mechanics that get discussed, Amass. So Amass is the Rakdos, the black red bad guy mechanic. So Amass is put X plus one counters where X is the Amass number on an army you control. It's also a goblin. This is for Amass goblins. So if Amass orcs or Amass zombies, it would add the creature type onto the army. If you don't control an army, create a 0/0 black goblin army creature token first. So the interesting thing about this is it's like an Ophiomancer type mechanic for me, in that the first one gets you a free creature token, which is pretty powerful. But every succeeding amass effect or mechanic trigger um, essentially just puts a +1/+1 counter specifically on the token, which is less powerful. So they've kind of balanced out the power scaling for amass. And it's interesting that Amass is usually on Grixis type colors, Grixis colors. So you have choices in where you want to assign your or use your resources, because you could spam the use of Amass and keep using. In fact, it's in this card here itself. Sacrifice another creature. You could sacrifice an existing army, but so that's in the black red aggro style, sacrifice aggro style, but you could go late game and try to amass such that the army gets big and just support your army. So amass is a really good mechanic, I think, because it gives you two choices for playstyles. Oh my gosh, I've talked for a really long time, sorry about that. Very silly army card. And then discussed in Mark Rosewater's article, the elves in green blue get landfall, and the wargs in green black get ferocious. Those are common enough, I think, that they didn't really need to talk about it, because landfall is whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, and ferocious if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. But it's interesting to me that they put landfall, they matched landfall with Simic, because I think that'll kind of give it a different twist. Like, what does blue landfall offer? Same with Golgari Ferocious, because usually Ferocious is in green red, where red cards can give you like a really good high power creature early. But I wonder what it does, what black Ferocious does for through strategy. Anyway, I think this video's got really long. Next time, I guess I should speak less or more concisely. Anyway, thank you for listening if you've listened at all. Goodbye.